Hi, Bobby. Bobby, did you see what I prepared?
What do you mean?
Do you see what I prepared? That I actually took the article, the first article, and commented it. I mean, kind of highlighted it.
So,
You know, this was the first article, and I took a time to actually underline it to make the discussion easier.
Okay. I need to be in here or I need to move the
Oh,
thing.
move this stuff?
No, the,
Oh, oh, that's fine.
is it all right
Either
for me to
way.
be in here? Okay. All right.
Sure.
Hi, Paul.
hey, how you doing, Bobby?
I'm well.
Good.
Kendris is traveling, so she might be only available through through audio.
Yeah, that's what it looks like.
But
Yeah,
I
well,
don't think it's, the audio is still not working. Kendris, can you hear us?
she's still connecting. The thing says she's still trying to make a connection, so we'll just have to hope she joins us. Yeah. I'm trying to get my windows straightened out on my desktop. It looks like I'm clicking around. I'm just trying to get myself organized, if you will. So how was everybody's week this week?
I have, well, it's been rainy,
Yeah.
but we traveled for most of a month going to Indiana and then
Nice.
Boone, North Carolina, and then Virginia and Pennsylvania and back to Boone. So we've now been home for a week. Enjoyed that.
Have you been visiting family?
Yes.
How was the weather to deal with on your travels? Because every time I look at the weather on the news, I just say, man, I'm glad I'm down here in old sore thumb Florida, because we seem to have dodged a lot of it this year.
Well, we've had the weather has been fine. Yeah.
Good.
During our trips.
All right.
So we know that Chuck does not plan to attend tonight. I'm assuming that Ken is planning to be here.
I don't know. Do you have the? I'm going to text him.
Thanks.
I'm assuming that I have his cell phone right. Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm trying to convince the local Democratic Party here that they need to invest. Well, I don't have to convince them that they need to invest in some shared infrastructure, but I'm trying to help them find a solution. And I have to chuckle, but it seems like down here in Florida, the Democratic Party is really, yeah, it's one thing to sort of get out the vote a little bit if you live in an area that does well, but significant areas with population centers, the Democratic Party has not really been very inspiring.
What do you mean by infrastructure?
Well, you know,
What-
just a place where files can be posted in a convenient way to exchange information. So this local group, pretty much the only way they pass information around is through emails, and it's very inefficient. So
It's kind
everybody,
of hard in Florida when you can go ahead and, win elections by instigating emotions. Like we have the Cubans in
Yeah.
Miami and the Venezuelans and Nicaraguans and all that. And you don't have to give them anything. All you have to tell them is that the some Democrats are communist and
Right,
socialist, and they all just line up,
no, you're absolutely right. And you know, at the end of the day, the only way you're really going to counteract the people that do this is you have to be better at messaging, and you have to be better at outreach. And you know, it's kind of a long haul because
I mentioned before what is something called economic concept called, rational ignorance.
yeah,
Did I ever mention, that rational ignorance is an economic concept where the benefit of acquiring some knowledge is smaller than the cost of acquiring it. And I don't know what's happening, the Interfield, I have no idea who that is, Is that Ken? I have no idea if
that's
that's.
Kendrice, it looks like.
Yeah, my name, Interfield, I'm Kendrice's husband.
Oh, well, all right.
Welcome.
Yes, nice to meet you. My name's Paul.
Nice to meet you, Paul.
Ken Dries told me you were the smart one of the two, but I don't believe her. So you're gonna have to convince me. You have to convince me today that you're the smart one.
Oh.
She is.
Yeah, let's just be honest here. I mean, I don't have any pride. I don't have to stroke my own ego. My wife's smarter than I am, but she plays it so cool that she gives me that I get that feeling like I'm in charge and I'm smarter, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I think they do it to all of us.
Yeah. Nothing wrong with it. You know, you can lie to me all day. I'm happy about some things.
Okay, I can't get
No.
Bobby. Do you have Bobby's Ken's phone number?
No, I don't. I looked, but I don't have it. So I think we can just go ahead and begin.
Yeah.
Let me mention something
because-
before. The person organizing the meeting today is I selected the material, and the person who's going to really run the meeting is Bobby, supposedly. But we've been reading 3 books on racism, but a lot of it was abstract. And now we're really concentrating on an article in the Economist magazine, which is the most, to me, is the most important magazine in the world. I was telling Ken Dries that Mandela, when he was in jail, he was given the option of having just one magazine, and he chose The Economist.
Wow.
And the reason he was able to get the magazine is because, it was economic, so it didn't have anything political. But the large part of the education that what is the name? Mandela had over those years was by reading The Economist really cover to cover. And I keep believing that it's the most important magazine. There's got an article, a survey of 4 articles and the editorial. And the really nice thing about it is that it's a cold-blooded look about what can be done about racism. No sentimentality, no nothing, just about what can be done about racism in the United States, okay? So anyway, so that's a plan for today. And I was supposed to have the first one article of the group. Now, Bobby, do you want me to go ahead and actually share the screen of that article?
First, allow me to share screen. Okay. So these are the articles that, and so since Ken is not here, Ramon's going to go first with the article Race in America, then Paul, Millions of African Americans Remain Stuck, article number 3, and then, assuming we have time, articles 4 and 5. So we'll do 1, 3, 4, and 5. And so now I'm going to stop sharing, and Ramon, take off with your article.
Okay. I read this article. and
First, Ramon, actually, before you do that, so that I don't have to call you Kendrisa's husband, what is your name?
My name is actually Interfield.
Oh, okay. So that is
that
okay.
explains that.
Yes, that's my actual name.
Okay. Thank you so
You're
much.
gonna have to
All right.
explain to us the origin.
That's
It's
an
interesting
incredible
name.
thing. That's a real name.
Yeah.
I understand you're from the Bahamas, no?
Yes, I am from the Bahamas. My name means unusual problem solver. It's a hybrid between Native American and African.
Wow, that's very cool. Wow.
Okay.
Yes.
I am Cuban, born in Cuba, came here as a child refugee to the United States in 1962, and my family comes from Spain and Lebanon, and I have about, according to 23andMe, I have less than 1% Native American, So I have no idea how that came in there, but I do have 1%, 1%. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and share the screen right now. And the way the Economist works is they have a survey, which is about 8 articles that is very factual. This very factual. And then they have an editorial, which kind of say, yeah, now that we learn all these facts, what can be done about it? And the article that I have is that editorial that is kind of looking at all the information in the individual articles and coming up with recommendations and a plan of what can actually be done, okay? And Bobby, don't let me be the one that kind of makes all the comments. You should be making most of the comments on what I have underlining. Okay, can you people see the screen?
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. we do.
Ramon, you're leading the discussion for this article, so you go ahead.
Yeah, well, okay, well, anyway, the big deal, the article says, well, all of this stuff is okay, but what can be done about it? What can be done? What's practical to do? And that's really the article, what can be done? And so it says the Biden administration and the Democratic Party has made reducing racial disparities an organizing principle of government. That sounds straightforward, but it is not. Despite the gains in legal and political rights made by African Americans in the Civil War, measures of relative poverty and black-white segregation are barely moved in half a century. Tackling enduring injustice requires clear thinking about their causes. And it says most racial disparities come from about 3 different things. One is secular economic trends. The other one is the aftershock of slavery. And the other one is segregation and present-day bigotry. And the first thing that they're talking about is, the way they talked about it, is that the first 2 are the ones that we can do something about, the government can do something about. The third is very difficult for government to do anything about it because it has to do with racism, how people feel and all of that. It's very difficult to change the mind of people who are racist. It says that the third one takes most of the attention, but the real action the government can take is in the first 2. Does that make sense? The secular economic trends and aftershocks of slavery. How can we do something about it? And the first thing they're talking about is COVID-19 has killed African Americans at a higher rate than whites or Asian Americans. The causes are stayed unclear, but the blame is unlikely to lie on racist doctors, nurses, and insurers.
Okay.
Instead, the reason that are likely to include past racism and instead for reasons that includes past racism, present poverty is probably the main reason. Okay, and also pre-existing conditions, because Black Americans have higher rates of poverty and less insurance and all kinds of things. Those are the things that are the most likely reasons why Black Americans are dying more than whites and Asians. Okay.
Okay.
So racism remains a curse in America, though it is less widespread than 30 years ago. But since it is lodged in bigoted minds, rooting it out is really very hard for government to do. So why don't we concentrate on the other things? So let's go ahead and worry about two things: poverty and the structural legacy of racism and institutions. Okay, the poverty and the structural legacy of racism and institutions. O sea, these two can be, there's things government can do. Am I being clear so far?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. Takes Biden's new child tax credit, which looks likely to reduce child poverty by 40%, okay? But because African Americans are disproportionately poor, this race-neutral policy should actually help more than 40% of Black children. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, your last statistic wasn't what this says, though. It should help more than 40% of Black children who are in poverty.
yeah, I wanted to say
That's
that.
a little different than what you said.
Well, and you have to put up with my poor English, I guess. But that's what I wanted to
What
say.
you
That's
said was it would help more than 40% of Black children.
Yeah,
No, it's easy.
I didn't say it right. Thanks.
it's easy to get hung up on the words. Keep going, Raymond.
Yeah, anything that I don't say clearly, let's go ahead and do it. Now, given that the practical problem is racial disparities, why not target help directly at African Americans instead? One reason is practical. People are more likely to support measures that they themselves might benefit. The child tax credit employees brought backing, where it designed to benefit only one group, support would plummet.
Yeah, and in support of that, one of the other articles talked about objections to efforts to reduce poverty in the 1960s.
Yeah, there is a saying in policy that a poverty program is a poor program. You ever heard of that statement?
No.
Funny play on words.
Well, basically what it is, if you make it a poverty program, it will not get support because a lot of people don't feel that it does anything for them. So anyway, people are, so the first thing is this, if people don't feel that it's going to help them, they're not going to support it.
Yeah, that is true. I have one comment about that, which I don't seem like most people are addressing. In order to right or wrong against one group of people, policies and or benefits need to address those people specifically. It is not racist to say that we're trying to right or wrong that happened to African Americans, so we need to target them specifically. Like how we did with the Native Americans. They gave them their own land, they have their own government. So, and you are right, the broad spectrum of people in the US, which are predominantly white, will not support it because it doesn't benefit them. But it's not designed to benefit them. It's designed to right or wrong. And when you wrong a group of people, like African Americans were enslaved, not white people as a mass group in the US. So those policies need to specifically target them. So yes, the policy in itself is racist, but it needs to target the group of people that was disproportionately affected by it. So that's one of the things that me as an African American find it hard to conceive.
Well,
Good point.
remember, I mean, both the people in this group, I believe, were very, very much in support of some kind of reparations. But what we're really dealing with this article is what can be done. What can we get away, okay? What can we get away in helping Black people and other, deserved people in such a way that we don't end up with a backlash that we ended up with having Trump and Trump-like people for the rest of, I mean, which is what can happen here very easily, okay?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can try to do the right thing and then, trying to do the right thing. And, well, some people say you can be dead right. You can be dead right, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, we have, this article is very much about what can be done without toppling the apple cart, okay?
Yeah, go back, share the screen again, because there was a quote there that people that directly sought to, so the last bullet on this page addresses the distinction between what Interfield said. Yes, it would be just to specifically address past injustices by reparations, but any administration that pursued doing that, the comment here is they'd soon be out of power. And that's the issue of.
One thing Interfield is that The Economist is noted for lack of sentimentality. They're really very much, I mean, this is a magazine that started in 1850s about, 1850, about how to use markets to solve social problems. And they're I mean, many people who are from the right and the left and all that, they cannot detect actual bias in the magazine. I mean, I met people from the right and the left because it is all nuts and bolts. It's all nuts and bolts. Last night, I spent some time reading an article from The Economist about what the hell is going on with this business about people having problems finding people to work. And it was a long article about the research in the area, research in the area from different areas, The Economist and all of that. It goes beyond and above the people say, oh, just people are getting welfare. I mean, getting money for not working, so they're not showing up to work. This is a really thorough study. And that's the way the magazine is. It's very, very thorough. It's almost academic and research-wise, okay? Very research-oriented. So anyway, let me go ahead.
Actually, Ramon, let me interject just a sort of question.
Should I share the screen?
Rather than just accepting that reparations is not a feasible political policy, I think that's an overgeneralization. I think that reparations can be done on a more local level. They may be infeasible nationally, but I think individual cities can take actions that are really much more targeted to help remedy past wrongs. I hope the city of Tulsa is doing that. I hope, and I think earlier this year, Asheville, North Carolina, I think passed some policies that were reparations related. And so I think on a local level, it could happen, and maybe it could even gain some momentum. But I think what the Economist is saying is sort of on a broad national level.
Okay.
Interfield, do you have a comment about that?
Yeah, I mean, my comment about that is you are correct. There are some level. There's another program in Chicago addressing housing disparities as well as a form of reparations. Um, my issue with that is when we look at the history, America accepted the Ku Klux Klan as a group. They accepted slavery of African Americans as a group. They accepted all these other things that has brought like specific groups of people doing things. But when it comes to trying to right those wrongs, it just seems like it's trying to take a way out, trying to find an excuse not to do it. You know, I had a friend, we had a discussion about race. They don't teach slavery because it will create a divide between the students. But if we ignore the past, we're doomed to repeat it. For me, it just states that they just want to sweep this particular era under the rug and don't address it. And it seems, and to me personally, like there's nothing against anybody, the paler your skin is, the more likely people are to want to do reparations. There was a form of reparations for the Asians that came through to work the railroads. There's a form of reparations for the Italians that came in and worked the factory. There's a form of reparations for the Native Americans. But one of the biggest injustices was slavery, and there is nothing for it. It's just something they try to sweep under the rug. So locally you can, but it needs to be addressed nationally, where everyone can agree slavery is wrong. Everyone can agree racism is wrong. Everyone agree all these things are wrong, but they will never agree to compensate the African Americans as a group for those injustices. But they agree to compensate the Asians. They agree to compensate the Native Americans. They agree to compensate all other groups for things that the country itself did to a specific type of group, depending on the situation.
Interfield. That's one thing though that the Economist is saying though. The statute of limitations of that point it's up. It's expired. Hi, Daddy.
You just like had a little one. I mean, there is, in my opinion, there should be not a statute of limitations. I was not born in this country, so either way, I won't benefit from it if we look at it from that perspective. But there's no statute of limitation on murder. There's no statute of limitation on all these other things. Tulsa, like you referenced earlier, Tulsa was a thriving, affluent Black community. They were self-sustaining. They had their own businesses. They had their own community. They had their own version of the stock market, and they were doing very well. And all it took was a group next door jealous of their wealth. I don't know the situation specifically, other than there was some type of conflict, but it just took that for them, one group, to burn down the whole community and destroy it.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're seeing that happen even to this day. They call it gentrification. Anytime a Black community, in my opinion, anytime a Black community is growing and self-sustaining, the government in itself, be it locally or nationally, destroys that community. And it seemed to be perpetuating itself, and it keeps continue going on. And we just need to agree that these things are wrong, address it. If there's a form of reparations, do it, regardless if it's politically good or not. Because when the emancipation happened, that was not a political windfall for anybody.
Yes.
That's moral.
At this point, I look at it this way. What would be enough? You can.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to tell you, and as everyone is aware, and Interfield brings it up, and I agree 100%. All of us have been, well, not all of us, but the people that look like me and have been fed a version of history that's so inaccurate. And in Florida, they've already our great governor has decided that they cannot teach a version of history that's more accurate, which is pretty devastating. But hopefully we can get rid of that guy the next chance he comes up in a few more years.
Mr. Phil, let me mention something. Bobby mentioned something. There's a guy that writes in the New York Times that is called David Brooks, and he wrote an article about what was the most practical way to do reparations. And he said the most practical way to start, at least to start reparation, is to start by neighborhoods, because it's clear the neighborhoods that were redlined, and the neighborhoods that were actually, you can actually trace areas where they clear the neighborhood, the black neighborhood, to put a highway in there and gave the black people less money for their houses that they were worth. So they're very, very clear areas where they, everybody's clear that they actually, that neighborhood was screwed, okay? And if, I agree with you, I agree with, by the way, I want reparations all the way. I agree with you, I want you completely, okay, completely, but I don't want to do it in such a way that we ended up with Trump forever, and that's what I really worry about. But I think, according to David Brooks and Bobby now, is that there is a certain way to start reparations that we can get away with and can happen without really tipping the government in the direction of Trump or somebody like that. And that is by neighborhoods. That seems to be the most practical way to start. And I agree with that. And certainly, I don't think there's going to be a lot of problems getting people in Tulsa to do some kind of reparation. I mean, something happens. Yeah.
So I think, Ramon, because yours is sort of a general article, I think it's time to move to Paul's article and then to number 4, and then we'll go back to the number 1 article at the end, because I think, as you said, it's a synthesis. And so I think it'd be better to look at some of the details in articles 3 and 4, and then we'll go back to number 1. So, Paul, do you want me to display this, or do you have a version of number 3 that you'd like to show?
I'd just like to talk about the article in general
I just want to make sure, Bobby, before we do that, that we use this as an opportunity to nail Ken Dries and Interfield. If this takes more than 1 meeting, that they will show up for the next meeting.
Well, rather than have the words in front of us, I just captured some of the text, and I just want to talk about it in a general way. The article brings up some interesting points, but I don't think it's going to take that long to go through it. But I think they make they talk very specifically about this last century and what happened, and they raise some very interesting points that talk about why we have such a problem, why the issue of intergenerational poverty is very much something that many African Americans are stuck with. And I think that it's easier to just talk about it in general terms rather than have to squint at the print. And I've also got some notes here, so I don't want to take up the whole screen because I got my own notes. I just want to talk about it that way, if that's all right.
Yep, go ahead.
Okay, so we got to unshare the screen. Get the screen. There we go. Okay, so the second article is really about talking about how African Americans seem to be stuck financially, economically, and it's kind of an obvious point, but the byline of the article kind of sums it up, and really, it's not a surprise if you sort of have your eyes open, but for some audiences, they may be going, "Oh wow, here's the tagline: African Americans are poor, they're less likely to own their homes, and more likely to be imprisoned than whites." This is just a statement of what the condition, what the reality is today. It's an unfortunate reality. And so the article goes through, I don't really get what, I guess they do, we're just setting the groundwork, because they were talking about Minneapolis, which is where we know that's where George Floyd was murdered. So they spent a little bit of time, talk about Minneapolis, but the real gist of it is not what's happened, not centered on Minneapolis. But so just for historical review, they talked about how Minneapolis was basically built by Scandinavian immigrants. They no surprise, because that part of the world, they have a lot of water power. These folks brought some of their skills with them, and they harnessed the Mississippi River. And so there was a lot of industrialization around different milling, where, because there was a lot of agriculturals produced in the area, and, those grains have to be milled. So that whole area evolved around industrial processing agricultural products. They talked about how in the current time, it's a relatively balanced, in terms of population, it's relatively balanced, with about 50% of residents white, 30% Hispanic, 15% African American. And that's a nice mix, but yet here we are dealing with the realities that were pretty much awful on the ground there. The article cites they cite a couple of statistics. So the area where George Floyd was murdered, Powderhorn Park, it's actually not necessarily that bad a spot in town. They talked about going a little further north, approaching the city center. They cited another area called Phillips, and they crunched some numbers, and they said that the median adjusted annual income for a Black child born in that area is $23,000. I don't know why they go into the specifics, but I mean, it's just a measure. I mean, so when you think about an area that's a little bit, that area is a little bit more diverse, but it's not also highly in poverty. How can you have that low of a median income? And but the gist of the article, what was the key point they talk about, is how they really perceived a pattern that poverty tends to be passed from parent to child. And, all of us, I think, are lucky enough, we're better off than that. So it's a little hard to really hard to see it unless you get around and people. It's hard to understand that dynamic of what takes place. And they they highlighted, again, tying this back to George Floyd, that he grew up in in Houston. He struggled in a really poor area of Houston, trying to make his way out. He was on a scholarship to a community college in Florida. That didn't pan out. And he wound up with some challenges in his own life. He wound up with drug problems, going to jail, et cetera, et cetera. And, his great recovery or escape was to move to Minneapolis. Even in that, they say, well, he moved from one deeply scarred neighborhood to another. That's kind of obvious. If you're struggling, you're not going to move into an upscale part of town. So, this article's got a little fluff in it. But, what I think is really critical in this article is what they highlight as really a persistent pattern and of this reality that if you're born into poverty, it's very difficult to get out of that situation. And so what they talked about was really kind of a confluence of the things that have further exacerbated this. So they talked about, in the turn of the last century, there was really a great move from the South, from African Americans who they wanted to get out of that segregated life to find better jobs and all that. So they refer to as a mass migration of about, they estimate it was about 6 million people, maybe a little more, that moved from the South up to the North to basically find better opportunity. So we all know, and this article just highlights, because they're trying to educate everybody. We all know that up north, essentially what happened is there was a lot of restrictive covenants that limited where property could be conveyed, who it could be rented or leased to. So this is one of the reasons why, even though in the time frame post World War II, where there was a lot of a lot of people moved during World War II, and there was a lot of housing going up. There was still a segregation line because of these covenants that were placed on a lot of them. They cited here's one example, which just it's staggering to me that this would be in writing. This property shall not be sold, mortgaged, leased, or occupied by any person or persons other than members of the Caucasian race. And we know that in post-depression, part of the New Deal was the creation of the Federal Housing Administration, and what that was really about was it was a way to, prior, in the time leading up to World War II, in that earlier time frame, if you wanted to buy a house, it didn't matter who you were, your banks, you had to have 20-25% down. And so where FHA was instrumental in incentivizing and improving the opportunities for everyone to buy houses, they came in and FHA created subsidies, and they incentivized the finance community to offer housing with lower down payments that made housing more affordable. Except, of course, that didn't really work if you were Black. So we know that part of the problem.
Basically, what they did is the following. They said, we'll do that as long as your neighborhood is not a neighborhood that is in decay. And if Black people started moving into that neighborhood, all of a sudden it was a neighborhood in decay. And also Black people didn't get the chance to, when it was really, there was a sweet spot in American history where if you bought a house, you really created a lot of generational wealth.
Yeah, that's the point. One of the ways out of poverty is home ownership, because it becomes a longer term asset that can appreciate. But it's very clear that this situation up north didn't really help anybody out.
The policy was actually targeted to increase housing, home ownership among whites. And if you were not white, you got a problem. And by the way, my mother was redlined.
Yeah.
My mother was redlined because, we were going to buy a house, and the neighborhood we were going to buy it was the Cuban section of Miami where the Cubans were moving in. And when everybody was getting a 3% mortgage or 4% mortgage, my mother had to pay an 8% mortgage.
Right.
And so anyway, that's a minor little thing, but this happened throughout the United States. And even today, you have a problem. If somebody knows that the house is owned by a Black person, the evaluation is 40% less than the house. I read lots of articles in the New York Times where a Black family listed their house, to remove all kinds of indications that it was owned by a Black person, and the evaluation went up 40%.
Let me try to get through this. Let me try to get through this article, Raymond.
Yeah.
I understand. I think we all get what you're saying. So here's what struck me in this article, just kind of eye-opening, that this whole issue of these covenants wound up in the Supreme Court in 1948. This is what they talk about in there. And at the end of the day, the Supreme Court said, these covenants can't be enforced. So I think we got a little reprieve here. But the reality is that if you sold your property or land to people that you couldn't enforce the covenant, you could still be sued in court for decreasing the property value of your neighbors just because the neighborhood was getting integrated. So that shows you, even in 1948, even when they're trying to do the right thing, they really weren't. And that to me is pretty staggering. What they cite in the article is that really one of the points in legislation that should have made a difference was the Fair Housing Act in 1968 that really came down on this situation. But even that, at the end of the day, what they cite in this article is that, after that event, one of the only real market things that happened was that a lot of white folks just moved out of the city and moved to the suburbs. So that, when you think about the dynamics of what's going on, it shows that underlying racism is still fundamental, even though it's not explicitly, it's the rules of the game we're still tilted.
I would say that the American government was trying to do the right thing for white people.
Well, it's still, you know, the point
For
is,
example, in the South, to get Social Security going, they had to exclude domestics because they were mostly blah, blah,
yeah. I mean, at the end of the day,
even Social Security, it was targeted to help only white people. And, areas where were disproportionately black and all of that were basically excluded. So I would not say that we were trying to do the right thing for everybody. We were not trying to do the right thing for everybody for a long time. Maybe recently we have changed that, but that was not American history.
Right. I think we're dealing with a complex problem.
Okay, go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, to keep going, because this article was pretty illuminating, I have to tell you, and it's easier to just talk in general terms than to try to look at highlights on the screen. What they cite is very interesting. I actually thought this was surprising because, being a white guy that don't know shit about history, you kind of want to believe that that's not the end of the game. But what they cite here is that most of the progress that African Americans made really took place before the civil rights movement in terms of their economic improvement. And even today, they say that even today in Minneapolis, 3/4 of white families own their own homes, but it's only about a quarter of black families do. They say that that's the second widest gap in the country. So the point of this article that is even in spite of attempts to have judicial redress to difficult or unfair or skewed practices, it's still a little hard to change behavior all the way around the spectrum. What I thought was really good in this article, they refer to what they call the great stalling. And so what they really say, the points they try to make here, and there were several things in play that were outside of the issue of civil rights by itself per se. And these are really economics they talked about in the time frame in the 70s. There was really a deindustrialization that swept through northern cities. We all know this. They were related to shifting trade patterns, technology change, the rise of more jobs down south because of the favoring of non-union workforces. So the cities, the industrial areas, were really hit for economic reasons. And then even more so we all know a little bit of economics, but here's what probably people that look like me don't know. There was two other things that were going on at that time. One of them was that there was really a surge of crime in black neighborhoods, and no one can really point to the reasons why. But there was a certain, obviously, but you think about it. If the economy's not doing well, crime's going to go up. So that's not rocket science. But that was one of the things that happened in inner cities. And the second thing they point out was it wasn't just the white folks getting out. Anybody who was a little bit better off, African Americans, they were headed for the suburbs too. So that really left the cities as it became more depopulated as well. And they sort of at the tail end, they cite that a statistic around Powderhorn Park, so that a little bit north, they said it was 23,000 a year. You move a little south, the black folks that have grown up there, the children that grow up there are more likely to grow up in where the average annual income is 17,000, which is I don't know anybody can live on 17,000. So this article really talks about that there are a number of different factors: economic, migration. There's a number of things that have also, outside of the politics and outside of the embedded racism, that have made it tough for folks that live in the inner city.
Let me interfere and Candice. My wife came to the United States to marry me when she was 50. Okay, she had no idea about black people, in the United States and all of that. And she's been watching television since she's now 72. So she's been here 25 years, and she often makes a comment. That she doesn't understand why black people are not burning the whole place down. The place, she just keeps talking, and she says she can't understand how black people put up with this kind of crap, and still, her perception is that the injustice towards black people and the brutality towards black people in the United States is being so large. She made that comment, recently about this program on Tulsa. And she just keeps talking about, I just don't understand, these people, what they done to these people is awful. And, I agree with that. The more you learn, it was not ignorant, it was not because of ignorance. It was on purpose to keep black people down.
Well, I'll add a couple more comments to that. So it was one of the books that I suggested for the group, but I pulled back because of the fact that I think it's, so just to fill you in, Interfield, the four of us, and Kendrisa has just recently joined us. The four of us have been on a journey for about a year, give or take, where we've gone through, white fragility. We started there and we went on to try to get some of this stuff figured out in our minds. And really, the last book that we finished was called Caste, which really creates a very good summarization of that things like what were done to African Americans in this country over the last 400 years are really based on an incentivization for those people at the top of a caste system to create economic incentive, and and all the different machinations of how they do it. So the book that I'm reading, but I'm going to tell you it's a lot to bite off. It's called Slavery's Capitalism, and it really kind of delves into it. It's a collection of essays that were done at a conference, I believe it was 2010 or 2011 at Brown University, by leading scholars that were trying to make the economic connections. And so when you bring up the subject of reparations, as valid as it is to consider that, I still honestly believe that most people, just from what I can get thumbnail and reading in this book of essays, most people really don't understand how powerful the economics of cotton cultivation based on slave agriculture, how much that transformed the U.S. economy. That set the stage for us to become a world power. And when you think of it on those kind of terms, it's very hard to figure out how the hell we're going to fix it. But
okay.
I'll say one more.
Let me just say a couple of things, Paul. Okay. Interfield, we read two of the books that we read. The first one was about white fragility, and it was kind of like how white people act, and sometimes they're thinking they're not being racist. But the second book and the third book we read were really important. One of them was how to be an anti-racist. And the guy who wrote the book is a popularizer on critical race theory, how policies are made to keep black people down. Okay, and the really bad thing is that book is very persuasive. It shows that how there are a lot of policies that on the surface are not racist, were actually there for the purpose of preserving white privilege. And the political part about it is that Florida yesterday approved, or the day before approved, made it illegal for you to teach critical race theory. In other words, public schools in Florida and other in other Republican states cannot actually teach
real history,
how policies have had a negative effect on blacks. And what's really interesting is that those laws have been made in such a way that even though they don't explicitly talk about, talking about racism, they might scare somebody who might want to talk about it, because if they talk about it, they might actually be accused of breaking the law. So states are actually forbidding schools and even universities in some places from actually discussing how policies have been created to keep Black people down. That's terrible, in my opinion. But that's the
Right.
yeah.
Ramon, I'm going to interject here. I'm going to go to the third article because it's actually it's interesting how it will connect to what you were just describing, Paul, and Ramon, you were describing as to our journey. So this is the last article we'll have time to discuss tonight. White Americans are beginning to realize that they too belong to a race. And I have excerpt from the full article, 2 paragraphs that I think capture everything. When it comes to their own race, white Americans divide into 2 tribes. And I think we're going to identify with the first tribe. You can read it there, but I'll read part of that first. As left-leaning whites become more conscious of racism, they also think more about what it means to be white. And it speaks of, within this, 30% of whites told a poll recently that they have personally taken actions to understand racial issues in America. So our group is not alone. It says 30% of whites in the last 6 months, or 6 months after Floyd's death, have done things like we're doing, reading these books. And then the last statistic for this first group, between 2014 and 2019, the share of whites who thought the government should spend more money on improving the conditions of African Americans increased essentially from a quarter to a half. So that 46% is actually quite promising in the sense that it said only 30% of whites. Anyway, that's one tribe, one white tribe. And now let's read about the second one. The second white tribe is different. White racial solidarity has a murderous past. Recently, it's been associated with tiki torches, neo-Nazis, Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. Yet only a tiny fraction of white Americans share such extreme views. And the sense of solidarity among whites, though, is broader. It's, in other words, those extreme views don't really paint what's broadly held. In the book, White Identity Politics, white identity is not a polite way of saying dislike toward other racial and ethnic minorities. And now this is probably the important sentence. White racial consciousness comes out instead in such beliefs as the evil of reverse discrimination, whites being discriminated against because of the color of their skin. Such views are not racist in the classic sense of white superiority. Those who hold them reject anti-Black stereotypes, but they are likely to discount the effects of past racism and to believe that African Americans who catch up with whites, they would if only they worked harder. So reverse discrimination, discounting the effects of past racism, saying, oh, there is no systemic racism, and saying it's just a matter of merit, just work. That is how the second tribe thinks.
I stopped 2 friendships, Bobby, because the 2 guys had a strong white identity. I felt so, I felt that it's so wrong to identify as white, okay, you're white, but that's not really your identity, And these 2 people, they were basically not racist in some sense, but they really felt that they were white. And I just can't understand why being white is such a big deal, or being Cuban American. You know, I'm Cuban American, but I don't identify as my primary identity as being Cuban American. I just can't understand why people are like that. But the reality is that there are, like this article says, and I know some people like that, is that there are some people out there that being white is very strong part of their identity, and they see themselves as competing with other races.
Yes, I'm turning to the whole article here because there's a quote that talks about this second tribe acts like a minority,
Oh yeah,
even though they are.
Yeah.
Look at the last paragraph
Yep.
here. This white tribe thinks more like a minority than part of the country's biggest single group, which is what you were describing, this white identity, like, hey, we are somehow being disadvantaged by the multiracial makeup of our country. Anyway, I thought we could all identify with the divide that this article describes in the thinking of whites in the US. Paul or Interfield, any comment about this article?
I'll make one comment out of the gate. I know Interfield's he's working on it. I know he's got something to say, but I'll make a comment. Most of my coworkers are kind of in tribe two. Got to be perfectly honest here. And I'm definitely on the first tribe. And I will underscore that the statement about reverse racism. I don't talk politics with my coworkers, and I'm retiring in another by the end of the month, so I won't have to look at their pretty faces. But that is one of the reoccurring themes whenever the discussion of current events comes up. The other thing to keep in mind about this group, which I really dislike, is they're pretty well armed and they have trigger fingers, and I'll just leave it there.
Wow.
I'm sorry to say that, but that's what I know. Everybody that fits that description where I work. You know, I think guns don't. I'm an anti-gun. Well, I should choose my words carefully. We have so many guns in this country because guns never die. And you know, the myth of the NRA is that more guns just make us all safer. Well, I don't know how many more we can get. We have like 1.2 for every living person in this country. We should be the safest country in the world. So their rhetoric doesn't match up. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Interfield. I just had to get my licks in. Now we're gonna wait for now I want to hear your opinion.
Bobby, you might want to stop sharing the screen so I can see people.
Well, yes. What I do understand about it is, like I was making a comment earlier, that anytime we try to do something that benefit Black people, there's always a group of people, mostly predominantly white, that make it seem as if you're being racist against them for being white. Okay. Yeah. So when we look backwards, like you was talking about history, about the disparity in economics for Black people. First of all, we were property. We weren't even human beings in America, right? Before a couple hundred years, we were slaves. Then when we got out of slavery, then there was segregation, meaning I can't own anything. Then you look at the economic system. When we try to buy houses, we redline our districts. Where most people live amongst people of their own race. That's just a fact. Most white people live together, most Black people, most Italians, most Asians, we go down the list. But when you redline the district in which I live, or the people who look like me live, that means I can't buy a house. So you want to know where the disparity in economic come from. You tell me I can't buy a house, or you won't give me the loan because I'm Black, or because I live in a Black neighborhood. So I can't own a house, I can't transfer wealth, I can't accumulate wealth, or it's harder for me to do so. And it triggers all the way down the system. Mm-hmm. So when we have the second tribe talking about, oh no, that is racist. No, the system is already racist against us. We have proven facts, numbers, figures. We can go down the list for 400 years at how it is affecting us. So if I'm less likely to own a house because the bank won't give me a loan because I live in a Black neighborhood, I can't accumulate wealth. And one of the reasons I looked at that is my in-laws took me down. I'm in Memphis, Tennessee right now. Took me down the street. Now, literally, the two neighborhoods are divided by one main road, okay, historically. On one side, he was telling me about back in the 60s that the white people were able to get loans for houses, meaning they can put down 3% and the bank will give them the rest to build a house or buy the house. On the other side of the road were the African-American community, in which they were not allowed to get loans, so they had to build their houses themselves, so their houses were smaller. So everything was small, and when they pass on the wealth in the white neighborhood go quicker because they value the property differently. So hence, even if we live in the same neighborhood, my property's worth less, so I don't have as much wealth as my white neighbor. And then one of you was talking about, if I try to sell my house, I have to move everything resembling African American out of it, because otherwise they will devalue my house. Even though I may live next to you, your house value 500,000, they might value my house at 200,000. And you know, most of these cookie cutter neighborhoods, we have the same house. So what's the difference?
Yeah.
You know, the difference is I'm Black. So there's a system, even though there's not a law, the underlying system, the appraisal appraise it differently because I'm Black. So the white fragility, as they call it, they're trying to make excuses because first thing you have to do is accept the role your race play. Now, that is not saying all white people are wrong or bad people. That is not saying that. But we must come to terms that these things are happening. Even with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they found out statistically that their system is even racist, because they found out that if me, a Black person, have the same credit profile, buying the same house in the same neighborhood, I will get a higher interest rate and pay more fees than my white counterpart. And they can't even figure out why that is. So even the systems they design has a bias built into it. And when we look at that, that means I'm paying more in fees and rates, so that's less wealth I'm accumulating. And even when I have it, I'm valued less because what? The only factor they found was my race. So you're not being reverse racism doesn't exist. If you need to address a situation that affects only one group of people, you need to admit that you need to target that group of people specifically. So like the Indians, you stole the Indians' land. They in turn, in order to compensate them, they have a country within a country.
That's right.
They have they can build casinos, they are self-governing, they don't even answer to the federal government. The same thing happened with Italians, they had some form of reparation. Same thing happened with the Asians that came across to build the railroads. They had their form of reparations. So that is not racist. And for people to think that way is totally disingenuous, because how can you fix the problem if you don't admit it happened and you need to address the people it happened to? Because if I go and burn down your house to indemnify you, I don't give everybody on the block a new house.
Yeah.
If I burn down your house, I need to pay for your house to be rebuilt, So, and like what's happened in Tulsa, the community was just burned down because what? Some group of white people thought it was bad, wrong, or whatever. Even if there was a disagreement between some Black people and some white people, that doesn't give you the license to burn down the whole community.
That's right.
So if you look at it, it's always the extreme ends of this group. And as much as I can agree with the conversation stating that reparations will be on the national level is very hard, and because the majority of the people don't look like me and wasn't affected the same way, that it'll be hard to sell it. But the reality is specific. you have to address the people that was disproportionately, at least specifically affected by these things, be it policy, laws, rules, regulations, segregation. And you need
Let me give you the counterpoint.
Let me mention something.
Actually, Ramon, let Paul speak.
Real briefly, I'll give you the counterpoint for how you can sell just about anything, because it's true. When you talk about benefiting a group that has been in duress, I can't find good language, but what wants to come out of my mouth I can't say. But when you try to address this, everything about what goes on is based on it comes from your perceptions about economics and your perceptions about the economy. And so many people, especially in that tribe too, they operate on what's referred to as scarcity economics, where, if we're going to change the slice of Joe's pie, if we're going to give Joe a bigger slice of the pie, my slice is essentially going to get smaller. The truth is that if you look at economic history, that's not at all the case. And that if you can help one group, everybody does better. That's the way you could sell this. The problem is the numbers and the impacts are so large. It's very hard to. If you could put an honest number on it, it would be staggering. But how you sell it is that if you help a group that struggled, everybody's going to do better.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's the argument I think it's a fair argument that can be made, because the reality is, if you lift people out of poverty, guess what? They buy more, they make more. The things that make the economy go around, it gets bigger. So, it's not like I'm making your slice of the pie bigger and mine smaller. When I make your slice bigger, the whole pie gets bigger. And that's how you sell it. But
Let me make some comments about Interfield. First of all, I want to say that what your family told you, there are many, many roads in the United States that were built to separate a black neighborhood from a white neighborhood. It's not only happening in Memphis, it's happened all over the place. And as a result of that, black people were actually kept from really being able to acquire. So I am 100% in agreement with what you're saying. The one thing that I want to say is that this article in The Economist is not arguing against reparation, is arguing in such a way to do reparation in such a way that the place doesn't turn up into a black. And I think there's a lot of arguments that if you want to do reparation, the most effective way to do it is to do it by neighborhoods. That is the way that may have the most impact, and is the way that is clear. Is clear, and it's a way that is less likely to create a tremendous backlash. And then I want to make another comment. I am Cuban, okay? And I happen to be a white Cuban. And you say, well, what does that have to do with anything? Well, when we came to Miami, they treated me really well. They gave us government help. They gave us Cuban loans. And I attribute that when we were looking for a job in Miami, people gave us the job because we were white over preference of a black person. So even though I didn't have anything to do with the racism, I benefited. Even though I was born in Cuba, I benefited by being white when I came to the United States. The way they're treating the brown people from Latin America, I was a child refugee. I mean, I came as a child refugee without parents. And, I came, they placed me in foster care. The government gave money to the people in foster care. I was treated great. And I think a lot of it was because I was white. So even though I may not have had anything, I benefited from being white. So I don't feel bad about, I don't feel bad about, having some reparations that might come, because I know I benefited. The one thing that I want to say is the following: the reason why people were able to be were good to Cubans is because everybody was doing better in the United States. everybody, when in the 1960s, when we came, everybody was getting, everybody's children were doing better. Well, the unions, white people were doing better. It's very easy to be nice to people when you're prospering. And that's
right.
why it's so important for Biden to come up with a program that everybody doesn't have a college degree prospers. And if we don't figure out a way of having everybody prosper, people are going to get mad, and people are going to be manipulated into blaming the other guy for whatever problem they had. But anyway, that's my comment.
The one thing
Yeah.
I really liked when Cory Booker was running for president, and I don't know if he was the man behind it, but one of the ideas that he talked about as a step that could be taken, and maybe you guys have heard about it or remember that from the campaign. He talked about the idea of what he referred to as baby bonds, and what they really were is that the government was going to begin to invest in treasuries for every child that's born. And
But
so,
that's discussing this article. Now, one thing that I want to say also is
no, it's not in the article, but I think it's a useful idea that benefits everybody, but will help the people who are in poverty. It will give them a nice leg up because those kids will be able to be more likely to be able to fund their college educations. So I think it's an important long-term step that has a direct benefit to a group that has some greater challenge.
let me mention one thing about those two tribes that Bobby talked.
Actually, Ramon, make one comment and then let's shift to Interfield or me.
Yeah, okay. The big comment is the following: the people who are in the first group, which is us, we don't have any economic needs. We're prosperous and all of that, so it doesn't really, we're doing really well. But if you happen to be those people at the bottom, they tend to be people that are really having a hard time because they haven't progressed for 40 years. And the question is, it is very easy for us to be good in being able to share wealth and do this and all of that because we're doing well economically. But those people at the bottom that have their children going on drugs and all kinds of things like that, unless we can figure out a way of those people doing better, I mean, basically everybody that is not people that don't have college degree, if we don't figure out a way of those people doing better, things are not going to look very well. And I finish with that.
Okay. We're sort of winding down now. Interfield, do you have a comment?
I'm good. You go ahead.
So my observation is that the idea of having more government safety net, more government support, I think is a way forward in our country. And I have in the past voted Republican and thought of, smaller government is better. My dad would make statements like, we ought to be able to keep our own money. And Ramon years ago highlighted for me an understanding that what we earn is not just a consequence of our own skills, but the whole system that we're a part of. So it's not really my money. And what small government to Republicans means is cut the programs that help other people, but we don't mind having the government benefit us in the programs like FHA loans and
Or mortgage deduction, the mortgage deduction.
Yes. And so the whole idea of encouraging actually the role of government it would make us a bit more like Europe with, just government seeking to care, for the broad needs of people. I can see the benefit of that now, and that as it increases the welfare of the people that need it the most.
Bobby,
And
when I came to the United States, every time I heard somebody talk about we want a small government and we don't want the government to benefit, they were always talking deep down about programs that were going to help blacks.
Hmm.
They never said we don't want to have the mortgage deduction. They never said let's get rid of zoning. They never said anything about it's always don't. I don't want to have a program that is going by those people, and those people were always black. It's always about not having a program that would go to the undeserving poor, and the undeserving poor, undeserving poor was always black women. It was always a black woman on welfare, whatever. It's all a con. All these statements about it was always it was all bullshit for saying we don't want to have black people. That's what it was. And I saw that. I've been seeing that for 40 years already when I was in the United States. I never was taken by that story.
well, I had not seen it.
Well, I
Yeah.
always saw.
Well, I like the article that I got to read, the one about the two tribes. I thought that very succinctly showed sort of what's happening in the country. And well, Interfield, thank you for joining us
It was
tonight.
great to meet you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll have to say, I will make one more comment, because Kendrice is listening, and she obviously let you take the lead. And, it makes me wonder, maybe you're the smarter one of the group. You and I can laugh about that.
Hey now.
She's doing a good job making the guys feel good. And, I hope she's not keeping score with any of our comments. But
Reese is in the car now, so she doesn't have a good sound.
listen, she's heard this whole conversation. She's bit her tongue, and let Interfield talk obviously out of his wisdom, out of respect, and maybe she learned a thing or two. Come on, guys, we got to stand up for ourselves here. We got to stand up for ourselves.
I enjoyed this. I really did.
Yeah,
the only comment I have about it is when you think about the two tribes, culturally, where are we going? And culturally, where, I'm just thinking, at what point are the tribes distinguishable? Or is that something that should even be addressed or is working to be addressed from one side or the other? When I think about African culture and African Americans, Ramon, you said your wife didn't understand why we just didn't burn the place down. But this is our America too. We're very proud of this place, and we don't want to see it go to hell. And we would do that to our neighbors, for no reason or for just cause even. It's historically Africans and African Americans have always sought to understand, the people around them, the people that they're introduced to. We welcome you. That Southern hospitality thing permeates the culture. So when we're thinking about the two tribes that the Economist describes, what does that look like? What is that culture that it represents, other than the fear of, the scarcity, the operation of scarcity and the operation of abundance? I'm just, interested to see what that's going to look like 40 years from now. So this was a really good article.
Well,
Yeah.
I hope that the following thing is the following Interfield. The articles in The Economist are about studying deeply. So I hope that we actually take the time of reading every one of those articles very slowly and really trying to understand their point of view without, their point of view is very practical, very economic, very research-based. And we actually come out of these with an understanding what can be done to move forward the most efficiently and in such a way that we don't end up, having a fascist government in the United States. If I may make one comment, by the way, this kind of situation is really interfering with my autism. I'm having a really hard time dealing with, because of my autism. People like me are very rule-based, and this is the right way to do it and the wrong way to do it. And when I don't see people doing things the right way, the way I understand it, I get extremely uncomfortable. So I'm always having to fight the certainty that comes out of my autism. It's very, very difficult to deal. When I see an article
Yes.
like this,
Oh, yeah.
articles like that, I kind
I
of
mean,
say,
I mean, it's a conflict for everybody to look
this
at.
is what needs to be done. This is what needs to be
Yeah.
done. And then, if I was not in autism, I would say, yeah, but this is but what's practical. The fact that I force myself to think of what is practical is different, very difficult for somebody with autism.
Mm.
Very difficult for somebody with autism to deal with the fact that this is the way things ought to be, but you
We're not
can't
there,
get everything
yeah.
you want, and how do we do it? So I have a struggle, constant struggle, understanding, what the logic says to do and what you can do so that you don't end up destroying the whole place. And Kendris, the other comment you made is very interesting. I have read a little bit about the Black church and the fact that Black Americans are, like you said, that we live here well and we want to do better. I give a lot of credit to that, to the Black churches. I think they had a lot to do with creating this forgiving culture among Blacks. No matter how badly they get treated, they're always willing to forgive.
One of the things I've always admired about The Economist, and if you read it, if you've seen this is their masthead, published since September 1843, to take part in a severe contest between intelligence, which presses forward, and an unworthy, timid ignorance obstructing our progress. That's a summation, and I think it's Raymond's brought a good resource by bringing The Economist into our discussions, because they have a European flavor of capitalism, which I think we know that our laissez-faire capitalism has kind of sold us all down the river over the last 40 years, unless you're one of the 1%ers or the half a percenters. We need to be a little more like the Europeans, as Bobby has suggested.
So we did 1, 3, and 4 tonight, and so 2, 5, 6, 7. I'll take 5 for next week, and let's assume that Ken is going to be back.
Bobby, can I actually edit it right now? If you let me share it, I will bring the page and I will edit it. Can I do that?
Kendris, I'm going to send you an email. I'm going to
Okay.
send you an email about the Executive in Residence program, where I invite speakers to
Okay.
the seniors. And each year I've been inviting one person from a nonprofit. So to speak to the seniors. And so I'll send you an email with a request for you to consider.
Awesome. Thank you. I will look forward to that.
Hey, Bobby, how do you
Thank
want me to edit, how do you want me to edit that?
Well, as a record of what we did tonight, move Articles 3 and 4 up to move Paul's article up after yours.
Okay, let me go ahead and just create something right here. Done, okay?
Yeah.
And done, and we want me to take the poll article out?
Well, race in America, yeah, I mean,
I think we have to go back to that article at the end because there's,
that makes sense, okay?
okay, anyway,
all
but
right.
let me go ahead and just do it.
You're showing us all your tricks now, Raymond.
Yeah, and then take the article number 5. Well, now number 4, now number 4, just, yep. Move it up to done.
And I'm gonna get rid of that. That doesn't really help there.
Yeah.
And you want me to put that there? Done. What else do you want me to do?
Right? Yeah, so delete it. Delete it. What's number 5 right now?
Americans are beginning to realize they belong to a
Delete
race.
that.
Yep.
Okay, what else do you want me to do?
All right. Move number 3 down to the bottom.
For recap.
You mean for later discussion or before,
No, so number 3, yeah, for later discussion, because
okay, I'm
we're
gonna
not
take
going
that
to
out.
finish them all
Okay, I'm gonna go down there.
after, put it at the bottom
Raising
for
America.
later discussion.
And that will be,
No,
you want me to put it on?
no, not there. Put it further down for later discussion. Put it at the bottom. Yeah, and then I guess the question is, so we've got, take away number 3. Yep. Okay. And then whoever, Paul, do you want to take one of these?
For later discussion. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. It doesn't matter to me. I'll take one. Somebody else got to take the other one.
Okay, so do we leave Ken, do we have Ken do that the next time?
Well, Ken's going to hopefully be next time for his article.
Okay, Bobby, do I leave just 4?
Yeah, 3 and 4, leave them.
And I'm gonna put something for Ken, okay?
Not for Ken.
Oh, for me.
For Paul, yeah.
Yeah. I would like to do the one on reparations,
Okay.
which is not number 5, but I believe it's number 6. But it'll become number 5 when you move it up.
A little side note, when you say you would do the one on reparations, I remember you two guys talking about what it called. I'd rather have casinos rather.
Yeah. I think that's killer. I think that's
Okay, which
I grew up in Eastern Connecticut, and the Indian tribe up there got casinos. Let me tell you, whatever's left of them, they're living large and they deserve it. So
Okay, let me ask you something. Which one do you want me to put under Paul?
number 6.
The one that is number 6 now?
Yes.
Okay, Interfield, do you want to do one or not? Or Kendry's? Interfield, you're
Hey, give me one. Just to let me know which one it is. Either one.
I'll take one as well. You just have to add me to the email chain.
No, you go ahead and tell me which one you want, now. Let's go to get it then later. We can always change our mind here. Okay, which one do we do now? Do we put something, Interfield there, something for
Well, I
Interfield?
mean, we've already got 3 discussions on tap for next week. Maybe we'll just leave that for later because we barely got through 3 this week.
I think that makes sense, but let's put Interfield and Kendrisa's names by 6 and 7.
Yeah. there we go.
Okay.
But
Doable.
that would be for later though, no?
Yeah, not next week.
Okay.
I would be lucky if we get through what's on the table.
What do I want to do? 6 Interfield?
Yeah.
Well, you can just put both of their names and they
They
can
can
sort
pick.
it out later.
Yeah, there you go.
Going to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
This way we're gonna find out who's got the bigger brain.
Well, I mean, what that means is Kendri's gonna be the one who
Andres
decides.
does,
You know, I'm
I
gonna
gotta
tell you,
live with
I
this
think-
woman,
No way. I defer to him.
Listen,
I
I just figured out after 40 some odd years of marriage that my wife's been playing me for 40 years, 40 some odd years. Now I just call her, I just call her big brain. Because when she busts
I
out
figured
big
that out
brain,
early.
she puts it on me. I got nothing to say. I'm just like, baby, don't put the big brain on me so much.
And Ramon, if you would put your name by that last article.
That would be, what's the next Friday?
The next Friday is the 18th,
Yeah, 18th.
June 18th. All right,
And what do you want me to put my name?
the last article, Race in America.
The recap. You got the recap, Raymond.
Okay,
Wait a minute, just give me a second, so because
Yeah.
I want to make sure once I have it done, I did it right.
yep, this is good.
Wait a minute, wait a minute, because I have to save this. I have to save
yeah.
this. Wait a minute, I have to save it, and then we want to make sure that the changes we want went through. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Anyway, let me go ahead and publish that, and make sure that we don't have, that's actually what we want.
You're showing us all your tricks, Raymond.
Okay, how about that? That was article, you see, didn't know, okay, wait, I have to refresh.
Keep going. You got it. You're doing. Oh, uh-oh.
yep, there it is.
There it is.
Now, Kenny's got that, making sure that for later discussion, okay, Interfield and Kendri's, and then Ramon does the number 8. Is that the way it is?
That looks,
That looks great.
okay.
Kendri's and, Interfield and Kendri's, you agree with that?
Yes.
Okay, I'm gonna leave.
That was great. Great session. I really enjoyed it. Thank
The-
you,
I'm really
Bobby
glad,
and Raymond for leading this.
Interfield,
Yes.
when you were talking, about, I really identify with you a lot because of my autism. I mean, I tend to think in terms of what ought to be, and this is the way it is, and this is the way it is. And it's very difficult for me to deal with subtleties, and, practicality, and all of that. So, I mean, I just wanted to tell you that I kind of identify with you because of that, because it's so difficult for me to see these issues about what's possible, and that kind of consideration is quite difficult for me. But anyway, I think we finish now, don't we? Or do we have any? I enjoy having you here.
Thank you guys for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was great to meet you.
Bye.
You all have a great week. I'm out of here.
Kendris, can you send me the email of your husband?
Yes, but not at the moment.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Yeah, y'all be good.